Without sight, without fear. Bryn Callahan pushed her thick-framed glasses up the bridge of her nose for what felt like the 100th time that morning as she navigated the crowded hallway of Theodore Roosevelt High School in suburban Philadelphia. The frames were deliberately oversized, the lenses noticeably thick, magnifying her pale grey eyes behind them. She kept her head down, her slight frame making it easy to slip between the clusters of students who owned these hallways with their loud voices and confident strides. Her dark brown hair hung straight and unstyled past her shoulders, another shield of invisibility she'd carefully constructed. The second week of October had brought cooler temperatures, and she wore an oversized grey hoodie that swallowed her thin frame, hands tucked into the front pocket as she moved with purposeful anonymity toward her first period chemistry class. She'd been at Roosevelt for exactly 9 days now, having transferred from a school in another state and already understood the brutal social architecture that governed this place. There were the athletes who commanded the Central Territory near the gymnasium and the cafeteria entrance, their letter jackets and confident swagger marking them as the aristocracy of this teenage kingdom. Then came the various sub-tiers, the popular students who orbited the athletes, the academic elite who claimed the library and advanced placement classrooms, the artists and musicians who congregated near the auditorium, and finally, the invisible majority who simply tried to survive each day without incident. Bryn had aimed for that last category, choosing clothes that wouldn't attract attention, keeping her voice soft when teachers called on her, eating lunch quickly in the library rather than braving the social minefield of the cafeteria. But invisibility, she was learning, wasn't always a choice you got to make. "Watch it, Four Eyes!" came a voice as a shoulder slammed into hers, with enough force to send her stumbling sideways into the lockers. Her glasses slipped down her nose from the impact, and she caught them quickly with one hand, while her other hand instinctively went out to brace against the metal, the sharp edge of a locker handle dug into her palm. Bryn adjusted her glasses and looked up to see Trent Ashford walking away without a backward glance, his broad shoulders cutting through the crowd like he owned every inch of space. He was exactly the type she'd learned to avoid, linebacker build, square jaw, the kind of casual arrogance that came from never being told no. His sandy blonde hair was cut in that effortlessly messy style that probably took 30 minutes each morning, and he wore his Roosevelt football jersey on this Tuesday, signaling his status to anyone who might have somehow missed it. 2 other guys flanked him, both in matching athletic gear, their laughter echoing back toward her. She said nothing, did nothing, simply straightened up, adjusted the strap of her worn canvas backpack, and continued toward chemistry as if the collision had been nothing more than an accident in a crowded hallway. Her hand throbbed where it had hit the locker, but she didn't look at it. Inside her chest, though, something ancient and practiced stirred, muscle memory that wanted to correct the way he'd shifted his weight, explained to her reflexes how easily that momentum could have been redirected, turned back against him. She breathed slowly through her nose, counting to 7, then out through her mouth for 8. The technique was automatic after so many years. Not here, she told herself, not now. You promised. The memory of her grandmother's hospital room floated up unbidden, the steady beep of monitors, the thin hand gripping hers with surprising strength. "You have a gift, Brinny," her grandmother had whispered, "but gifts can become curses if you're not careful. Promise me you'll only use what I taught you when there's no other choice. Promise me you won't let anger make your decisions." Bryn had promised, tears streaming down her face as she held that fragile hand. 3 days later, her grandmother was gone, taking with her the only person who truly understood what those after-school sessions in the converted garage dojo had meant, what they'd built together over 12 years of patient instruction. Chemistry passed in its usual blur of molecular formulas and careful note-taking. Bryn sat in the back corner, glasses reflecting the light from the projector as Mr. Henderson droned about covalent bonds. She copied everything methodically, her handwriting small and precise. When Henderson asked a question about electron sharing, she knew the answer but didn't raise her hand, watching instead as several other students offered their responses. Being correct drew attention. Attention meant being seen. Being seen meant becoming a target. The pattern repeated through her morning classes. She moved through Roosevelt like a ghost, speaking only when directly called upon, eating a quick sandwich alone at a library table during lunch while pretending to read ahead in her history textbook. Through the windows, she could see the social theatre of the outdoor lunch area. Clusters of students at picnic tables, couples intertwined on the grass, the athletes commanding the prime real estate near the vending machines. Trent Ashford held court at the center of the largest group, animated and loud, clearly telling some story that had his audience in stitches. In fifth period English, Mrs. Kowalski assigned them into groups for a project on American Romanticism. Bryn found herself paired with 3 other students who looked equally unenthused about collaborative work. They exchanged phone numbers for coordination, speaking in the flat tones of people fulfilling an obligation rather than forming connections. When one of them, a girl named Jessica with perfect makeup and designer jeans, wrinkled her nose at Bryn's battered phone case, Bryn simply tucked the device back into her pocket without comment. The final period was PE, held in Roosevelt's sprawling gymnasium. Bryn had a doctor's note excusing her from participation due to her vision problems, a carefully fabricated letter she'd had prepared before even enrolling. Instead, she sat in the bleachers with 2 other students who had various excuses, watching as the rest of the class played volleyball. She used the time to do homework, occasionally glancing up at the game, but mostly staying focused on her calculus problems. The gym smelled like old wood and sweat, decades of teenage exertion soaked into the floorboards. That's when she felt it, the prickling awareness that came from being watched. Years of training had honed her peripheral awareness into something almost preternatural. She didn't look up from her calculus, didn't give any indication she'd noticed, but she knew. Someone was staring. She counted slowly, waiting, and then allowed her eyes to lift, as if she were just taking a mental break from her work. Trent Ashford was looking directly at her from across the gym, volleyball forgotten in his hands. Even from this distance, she could see the calculating expression on his face, the way he seemed to be measuring her, evaluating. Then his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, and he turned back to the game, spiking the ball with unnecessary force that made it ricochet off the wall with a sharp crack. Bryn returned to her calculus, but the equation in front of her might as well have been written in a foreign language. That look meant something. In the complex social dynamics of high school, attention from someone like Trent Ashford was rarely a good thing. She could feel the framework of her careful invisibility beginning to crack. The week continued its downward trajectory. On Wednesday, she found her locker had been opened somehow, her carefully organized textbooks scattered across the floor of the hallway. Students stepped around them without helping as she knelt to gather them up, her glasses slipping down her nose as she worked. On Thursday, someone bumped her tray in the library, sending her water bottle rolling across the floor, soaking several pages of her history notes. On Friday, walking to her car in the student parking lot after school, she discovered someone had written NERD in the dust on her windshield. Each incident was small enough to be dismissed as accident or coincidence. Each one also built on the last, establishing a pattern that other students were beginning to notice. Bryn saw it in the way conversations would quiet when she passed, the sidelong glances, the whispers. The social ecosystem of Roosevelt was beginning to categorize her, and the category was victim. The following Monday arrived with grey skies threatening rain, the kind of oppressive Pennsylvania weather that matched Bryn's mood perfectly. She'd spent the weekend in her small apartment doing homework and trying not to think about her grandmother's dojo, now sold, to pay medical bills, or about the gym bag she kept in her closet that she hadn't opened since moving to Philadelphia. Inside were hand wraps that had molded to her knuckles over years of use, shin guards worn smooth, the black belt she'd earned at 15 after testing for 6 hours straight in front of a panel of masters who showed no mercy to youth. She'd walked out of that test with bruised ribs, a split lip, and a sense of accomplishment that still warmed her when she thought about it. She pushed the memories away and pushed her glasses up her nose, grabbed her backpack and headed to school. The cafeteria incident happened on Tuesday of that third week, and it was impossible to dismiss as accident. Bryn had broken her pattern of eating in the library, deciding that hiding was only making her more vulnerable, more obviously isolated. She'd purchased a modest lunch, pizza and an apple, and was carrying her tray toward an empty table near the windows when Trent Ashford stepped directly into her path. She stopped, adjusting her glasses to look up at him. Up close, he was even larger than she'd realized, easily 6'2", with the thick build of someone who spent hours in the weight room. His green eyes were cold despite the smile on his face. "Hey there, Four Eyes," he said loudly enough that surrounding tables quieted to listen. "You new here, right? I don't think we've been properly introduced." "Excuse me," Bryn said softly, moving to step around him, his hand shot out, not touching her but blocking her path. "Hold up. I'm talking to you." It's rude to walk away when someone's talking. "I just want to eat my lunch," Bryn said, her voice still quiet, but with a thread of steel that surprised her. She saw something flicker in Trent's eyes, a flash of genuine anger beneath the performative friendliness. "You just want to eat your lunch?" he mimicked, in a high-pitched voice that bore no resemblance to her actual tone. His friends, who had materialized around them, laughed on cue. "Well, maybe you should watch where you're going first." He reached out as if to clap her on the shoulder in a friendly gesture, but his hand came down harder than necessary, a calculated shove disguised as camaraderie. The impact sent Bryn stumbling forward, her tray tipping, and she watched in slow motion as the pizza and apple tumbled through the air. The pizza landed face down on her hoodie, sauce spreading across the grey fabric, while the apple bounced once and rolled under a nearby table. The cafeteria erupted in laughter and mock sympathy. Someone shouted, "Oh!" in that drawn-out way that signaled second-hand embarrassment. Bryn stood there, tomato sauce soaking through to her shirt underneath, her glasses slightly askew from the stumble. Her hands, empty now without the tray, hung at her sides. For just a moment, for a fraction of a second, her fingers curled into the beginning of a fighting stance, weight shifting to the balls of her feet. Then she caught herself, breathed, counted. "Sorry about that," Trent said with exaggerated concern, his voice carrying across the now quiet cafeteria. "You really should be more careful. With those glasses, I bet your depth perception is terrible." More laughter. Bryn felt the heat in her face, the prickling humiliation spreading across her skin like fire. But she kept her expression neutral, bent down, and picked up the empty tray. She walked it to the dish return, pizza still stuck to her hoodie, and then walked straight out of the cafeteria without looking at anyone. Behind her, the noise level gradually returned to normal, the entertainment over. In the bathroom, she cleaned the sauce off as best she could, but the stain remained, a dark blotch across her chest that she couldn't hide. She stood at the sink, glasses perched on the porcelain edge while she dabbed at the fabric with wet paper towels and looked at her reflection. Without the thick lenses in front of them, her grey eyes were clear and direct, the eyes of someone who'd spent years learning to see threats coming from every angle. She could see the tiny scar above her left eyebrow from a particularly intense sparring session when she was 14, the slight asymmetry in her nose from the one time she hadn't kept her guard up high enough, evidence of who she really was, hidden behind carefully cultivated camouflage. She put the glasses back on, the world blurring slightly at the edges the way it always did through the cosmetic lenses, and returned to class. The pattern was established now, and it repeated with variations throughout the following weeks. Someone would trip her in the hallway, apologizing profusely, while their friends snickered. Her locker would be found open again, this time with crude drawings on her notebooks. During group projects, she'd be the last chosen, paired with others only through teacher intervention. The athletes' table in the cafeteria would erupt in laughter whenever she walked past, though the joke was never explained. Trent was always at the center of it, but he was rarely the direct aggressor anymore. He'd established the pattern, defined her as acceptable prey, and now others carried out the harassment on his behalf, competing for his approval. There was Kyle Morrison, Trent's best friend and co-captain of the football team, a wiry guy with nervous energy who seemed to need constant validation. There was Marcus Jennings, the third member of their core group, built like a brick wall and blessed with more muscle than common sense. And then there were the orbiters, the hangers-on, who participated in the mockery because being on Trent's good side was social currency at Roosevelt. Bryn endured it with the same careful neutrality she'd maintained from the beginning. She never cried where anyone could see, never complained to teachers or administrators, never retaliated. She simply absorbed each incident, filed it away, and continued with her routine. Other students noticed her passivity and interpreted it as weakness. Teachers noticed the dynamic but did nothing substantial to stop it, perhaps assuming it would resolve itself, or perhaps not wanting to confront the school's star athletes over what appeared to be harmless teasing. But there were small moments when the mask almost slipped. In the hallway, when Kyle shoulder-checked her into the lockers, her hand shot out with professional speed to catch herself, absorbing the impact in a way that spoke of trained reflexes. During PE, watching the volleyball game from the bleachers, her eyes tracked movement with an intensity that had nothing to do with casual observation and everything to do with strategic assessment. Walking to her car, she moved with perfect spatial awareness, never quite surprised by someone coming up behind her, always positioning herself with clear exit routes. If anyone had been paying attention, really paying attention, they might have noticed these inconsistencies. But nobody was looking for anything beyond the surface of the shy girl with the thick glasses and oversized hoodies. November arrived with the promise of winter, bare trees, and early darkness. Bryn had been at Roosevelt for 2 months now, and the harassment had become part of the school's background noise. She was that girl everyone knew about, the target Trent and his friends had marked. Some students felt guilty watching it happen, but did nothing. Others found it entertaining. Most simply accepted it as the natural order of things. Then Sasha Petrov entered Bryn's orbit, and everything became more complicated. It happened in AP English, during a discussion of the Scarlet Letter. Mrs. Kowalski had split them into debate pairs, arguing different interpretations of Hester Prynne's actions. Bryn found herself paired with Sasha, a girl she'd noticed from a distance but never spoken to. Sasha had an unconventional beauty, sharp features, dark hair cut asymmetrically, wearing vintage band t-shirts and combat boots that set her apart from Roosevelt's mainstream fashion. She moved through the school's social hierarchy with apparent indifference, belonging to no particular group but respected in her independence. "So," Sasha said, as they claimed desks at the back of the classroom, turning to face each other for the debate prep. "I'm arguing Hester was too passive about her situation. You're defending her choices. This should be interesting." Bryn adjusted her glasses, opened her copy of the book. She worked within the system available to her. Sometimes survival requires adaptation rather than rebellion. Or sometimes survival requires fighting back, Sasha countered, but there was curiosity in her dark eyes, rather than aggression. Interesting that you'd identify with the passive approach. It wasn't said unkindly, but Bryn felt the observation land anyway. She looked up, meeting Sasha's gaze directly for the first time. There's a difference between passive and strategic. Sasha's eyebrows rose slightly. Okay, you're more interesting than I thought. Let's actually do this properly. They spent the rest of the period in genuine discussion, building arguments and counter-arguments that went far beyond what the assignment required. Sasha was sharp, well-read, unafraid to challenge assumptions. Bryn found herself engaging in a way she hadn't since arriving at Roosevelt, her usual careful guardedness lowering slightly in the face of actual intellectual stimulation. When they presented their debate to the class, Mrs. Kowalski looked genuinely impressed, nodding at several of their points. As class ended, Sasha caught Bryn's arm gently as they gathered their things. "Hey, that was actually fun. You're pretty good at this. Have lunch with me tomorrow? I eat outside by the art building when it's not too cold." Bryn hesitated, her instinct for self-preservation screaming warnings. Friendship meant connection. Connection meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant more ammunition for her tormentors. But Sasha was looking at her with genuine invitation, no hidden mockery in her expression, and Bryn was so tired of eating alone in the library. "Okay," she said quietly. "Tomorrow." Sasha smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Cool. Don't bring cafeteria food, though. There's a deli 2 blocks away that actually knows how to make a decent sandwich." That night, Bryn lay in her small apartment and stared at the ceiling, mind racing. The gym bag in her closet seemed to pulse with accusation, reminding her of promises made and strength deliberately buried. She thought about her grandmother's garage dojo, the smell of canvas and sweat, the satisfying impact of fist against heavy bag. She thought about the first time she'd successfully executed a complex throw, the way her grandmother had grinned with fierce pride. She thought about competitions in other cities where she'd fought under a different name, where nobody knew her as anything but a formidable opponent who fought with both precision and creativity. Then she thought about why she'd stopped. The tournament where she'd lost control, where anger at an opponent's illegal strike had made her response excessive, where she'd hospitalized a girl who'd done nothing to deserve that level of retaliation. The horror on her grandmother's face, the suspension from competition, the promise extracted in that hospital room that she would never let rage guide her hands again. She pushed the memories away and focused on the ceiling, on breathing, on the present moment. Tomorrow, she would have lunch with someone who might become a friend. It was a small thing, a normal thing, the kind of thing that should make her feel hopeful. Instead, she felt like she was lighting a beacon that would draw exactly the kind of attention she'd been trying to avoid. The following day, Bryn met Sasha outside the art building as planned. The November air was cold but clear, and they sat on a concrete bench that had been decorated with colorful murals by the art students. Sasha had indeed brought sandwiches from the deli, handing one to Bryn with the casual ease of someone who didn't overthink gestures of kindness. "So," Sasha said between bites of her turkey club, "you're going to tell me how you ended up at Roosevelt in the middle of the semester?" "Family reasons," Bryn said, which was technically true. Her grandmother's death had left her with no family at all, and the distant relatives who became her temporary guardians lived in Philadelphia. Needed a fresh start. "How's that working out for you?" Sasha asked, and there was knowing in her voice that made Bryn look up sharply. "What do you mean? Come on. Everyone knows Trent and his goons have been making your life miserable. I've seen the locker thing, the cafeteria stuff. Pretty much everyone has, and pretty much everyone's too chicken to do anything about it." Bryn was quiet for a moment, chewing her sandwich without tasting it. "It's fine. I can handle it. You know what's interesting?" Sasha leaned back against the mural, studying Bryn with unsettling directness. "You don't act like someone who can't handle it. Most people in your situation would be a mess, crying in bathrooms, complaining to teachers, maybe even switching schools. But you just take it, like you're waiting for something. I'm not waiting for anything, Bryn said too quickly. I just don't think engaging makes it better. Maybe. Sasha didn't sound convinced. Or maybe you're holding on to something they don't know about. Either way, I think you're tougher than you let people see. The observation sat between them, both accurate and dangerous. Bryn changed the subject, asking about Sasha's interest in literature, and they spent the rest of lunch discussing books and music and art. It was the most normal conversation Bryn had experienced since arriving in Philadelphia, and she found herself reluctantly enjoying it, despite her concerns. As they headed back inside, Trent and Kyle were walking past. Trent's eyes tracked their movement with predatory interest, noting the proximity, the easy conversation, the fact that someone had voluntarily chosen to spend time with his designated target. "Cute," he said loudly as they approached. "Four Eyes made a friend. Hope you know what you're signing up for, Petrov." Sasha didn't slow down or acknowledge him, simply kept walking, and Bryn followed her lead. But she felt Trent's attention on them like a physical weight, and she knew with sick certainty that she'd just made things worse. For herself, and now for Sasha too. The consequences arrived faster than expected. By the end of the week, someone had created a crude Instagram account featuring poorly edited photos of both Bryn and Sasha with mocking captions. The photos spread through Roosevelt's student body like wildfire, shared and screenshotted and laughed over in group chats and cafeteria tables. The captions were juvenile but cutting. Roosevelt's biggest losers, when four eyes met try hard, friendship goals, mutually desperate addition. Bryn saw students looking at her phone and laughing as she walked past in the hallways. In her classes she could feel the suppressed giggles, the sidelong glances. Someone had even printed out one of the photos and taped it to her locker, though a janitor had removed it before she arrived that morning. Sasha, to her credit, treated the whole thing with magnificent disdain. "Social media harassment," she said during their now regular lunch on the art building bench, "is the weapon of people with no actual power. It's pathetic." "It's working, though," Bryn pointed out quietly. "Everyone's seen it." "So, everyone's also going to forget about it in 2 weeks when the next drama hits. Trent Ashford is a small man playing king of a small kingdom. None of this matters once we graduate, but it mattered now, and they both knew it. The Instagram account had expanded their target status, making Sasha a secondary victim in Trent's campaign. Where before he might have left her alone due to some combination of respect for her independence or lack of interest in confrontation with someone who wouldn't show fear, now she was implicated by association. The harassment escalated accordingly. Someone wrote DYKES across both their lockers in permanent marker. During lunch, when they sat at their usual spot outside, groups of students would walk past, making exaggerated observations about their friendship, loud enough to be heard, but not quite direct enough to be called out. In PE, someone deflated the volleyball and left it in the bleachers near where Bryn sat with a note saying, "Your social life." Through it all, Bryn maintained her careful neutrality, absorbing each incident without visible reaction. Sasha, more openly defiant, would flip off the harassers or make cutting remarks that often landed better than the original insults. They made an odd pair, one silent and seemingly passive, the other verbally sharp and obviously unbowed, but the friendship deepened despite, or perhaps because of, the adversity. They texted in the evenings about homework and music. Sasha introduced Bryn to obscure bands and indie films. Bryn helped Sasha with calculus problems, her explanations clear and patient. It was in these quiet conversations that Bryn felt something shift inside her, a dangerous warmth spreading through the careful ice she'd built around herself. Sasha made her laugh with sardonic observations about their classmates. Sasha listened when she talked about missing her grandmother without offering empty platitudes. Sasha treated her like a person worthy of friendship rather than a victim worthy of pity. And that made everything so much worse, because now Bryn had something to lose. The first week of December brought a cold snap, temperatures dropping into the 20s overnight. Roosevelt's parking lot was a sheet of ice in the mornings, students walking carefully to avoid slipping. Bryn had taken to arriving early to avoid the worst of the crowd, and on Tuesday morning she was one of the first cars in the lot. She'd just grabbed her backpack from the trunk when she heard the voices. "Look who's here early." Trying to avoid us. Four Eyes? She turned to find Marcus Jennings walking toward her, flanked by two other football players she recognized, but didn't know by name. Marcus had the build of someone who'd been lifting weights since puberty, his neck almost non-existent between his shoulders and jaw. He wore his letter jacket despite the cold, apparently immune to temperature through sheer masculine pride. Bryn adjusted her glasses and tried to move past them toward the school building. Marcus stepped into her path, his considerable bulk blocking the way. "We're talking to you," he said. There was no humor in his voice now, no pretense of teasing. This was different, more direct, more dangerous. "I don't have anything to say," Bryn replied quietly, calculating distances, exits, witnesses. The parking lot was mostly empty, the few other students too far away to intervene even if they wanted to. "That's okay, you don't need to say anything. We just want you to understand something." Marcus stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "Trent's a good guy, and you and your little girlfriend have been disrespecting him, making him look bad. That Instagram stuff? That's nothing. He could make your lives so much worse." "We haven't done anything to him," Bryn said, and she was proud that her voice stayed steady. "You exist," Marcus said flatly. "You showed up at our school and thought you could just blend in, but you stick out like a sore thumb. Those ridiculous glasses, those ugly hoodies, walking around like you're invisible. And then you drag Sasha into your loser orbit, contaminate her with your patheticness." Bryn felt anger flicker hot in her chest, an ember of the rage she'd worked so hard to bury. She breathed through it, counted, maintained control. "Is there a point to this conversation?" "The point," Marcus said, stepping even closer so she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, "is that you should think about transferring schools. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Roosevelt doesn't want you here." "Some people want me here," Bryn said, before she could stop herself thinking of Sasha. Marcus laughed, a mean sound. "Oh, you mean Petrov? She's just slumming, trust me. Sasha's got a savior complex, likes to collect broken things. Once she gets bored of fixing you, she'll move on to the next charity case." The words landed with precision, finding insecurities Bryn hadn't fully acknowledged, even to herself. Was that all this was? Pity? A project? She felt her hands clench inside her hoodie pocket, felt the familiar shape of fists forming without conscious thought. "Got nothing to say to that?" Marcus grinned. "Yeah, I thought so. Remember what I said. Transfer out. Make everyone's life easier." He turned and walked away, his companions following, their laughter echoing across the cold parking lot. Bryn stood frozen for a long moment, breath steaming in the frigid air, before finally moving toward the building on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Inside, she found Sasha waiting by her locker, and the concern in her friend's eyes suggested she somehow knew something had happened. "You okay?" Sasha asked. "Fine," Bryn lied. "You're a terrible liar. What happened?" Bryn opened her locker, busied herself with organizing textbooks she didn't need to organize. "Marcus cornered me in the parking lot, suggested I transfer schools." "That motherfucker," Sasha said with quiet vehemence. "You reported it, right?" "That's threatening behavior, Bryn. They can't just—" "I'm not reporting anything." Bryn's voice came out sharper than intended. "It'll just make things worse. Or it might actually stop them. Teachers aren't completely useless. The administration won't do anything that risks their precious football program. Bryn slammed her locker shut, immediately regretting the display of emotion. Sorry, I don't want to talk about it. Sasha was quiet for a moment, studying her with those perceptive dark eyes. You're so convinced you have to handle everything alone. Has anyone ever told you that sometimes accepting help isn't weakness? I don't need help, Bryn said automatically, then caught herself. I mean, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. Really? Bullshit, Sasha said conversationally, but okay. I'll let you maintain your stoic, tough girl routine. Just know that when you're ready to actually do something about this situation, instead of just enduring it, I've got your back. She walked away before Bryn could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway, feeling simultaneously grateful and frustrated. Do something about it. As if there was some magical solution she hadn't considered. As if standing up to Trent wouldn't just escalate everything further. As if revealing what she really was, what she was capable of, wouldn't violate every promise she'd made to her grandmother in that sterile hospital room. The weeks trudged forward through December, each day bringing new small cruelties. Someone started a rumor that Bryn had tried to kiss Sasha and been rejected, which spread through the school with the speed of all salacious gossip. The Instagram account posted more photos, these ones edited to look like Bryn was following Sasha around like a desperate puppy. In the hallways, students would make kissing sounds when the two of them walked past together. Through it all, their friendship somehow endured. If anything, the shared adversity welded them closer together. They studied together in the library after school, Bryn helping Sasha with math, while Sasha introduced her to contemporary poetry that made her think differently about language. They texted late into the night about everything and nothing. When Sasha's vintage Volkswagen broke down, Bryn walked with her to the mechanic shop and waited, while she argued with the technician about pricing. When Bryn had a panic attack in the bathroom after finding more crude drawings on her locker, Sasha sat with her on the floor and talked about nothing until her breathing steadied. And slowly, carefully, Bryn began to realize that what she felt for Sasha was becoming more complicated than friendship. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was in the small moments, the way Sasha's face lit up when explaining a book she loved, the careful way she'd adjust Bryn's scarf when the wind picked up, the comfortable silences they could share without awkwardness. Bryn found herself thinking about Sasha at odd moments, found herself looking forward to their time together with an intensity that felt dangerous. Found herself noticing details, like the way Sasha drummed her fingers when she was thinking, or how she always smelled faintly of the peppermint tea she was constantly drinking, or the silver rings she wore on multiple fingers. It terrified her, not because Sasha was a girl, that part felt natural and right, but because caring about someone this much meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant weakness, and weakness meant giving her enemies ammunition they didn't currently have. So she said nothing, buried it the same way she buried her training, her abilities, her past, added it to the collection of truths she kept locked inside where they couldn't hurt anyone. But Sasha, perceptive as always, seemed to sense something shifting. Their touches lingered slightly longer. Eye contact held an extra beat. Conversations took on layers of meaning that hadn't been there before. One afternoon in early January, studying in the library, their hands brushed, reaching for the same book, and neither pulled away for a long moment. Sasha looked at her with an expression Bryn couldn't quite read, something questioning and hopeful and scared. "Bryn," she started, then stopped. "Never mind." "What?" Bryn's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Nothing. I'm glad you're here. At Roosevelt, I mean. Even with all the bullshit, I'm glad I got to know you." "I'm glad too," Bryn said, and meant it with an intensity that should have frightened her more than it did. The moment hung between them, pregnant with possibilities, until someone walked past their table and broke the spell. They returned to studying, but something had fundamentally shifted. The question had been asked without words, and the answer was hovering in the space between them, waiting for one of them to be brave enough to acknowledge it. Trent noticed the evolution of their relationship before they'd even fully admitted it to themselves. He had an animal cunning when it came to social dynamics, an instinct for finding pressure points and exploiting them. The casual harassment began taking on a more targeted edge. The Instagram account started posting photos implying romantic involvement, crude and explicit in their suggestions. Groups of students would make exaggerated romantic gestures when they walked past, someone mock serenading them in the cafeteria while others laughed. "They're trying to get to you through me," Sasha observed one afternoon, watching a group of sophomores make kissing sounds as they passed. Classic tactics. Attack what someone cares about. "I'm sorry," Bryn said quietly. "This is my fault." "You shouldn't have to deal with this because of me." "Don't," Sasha said firmly. "Don't you dare apologize for existing or for being my friend. If anyone should be sorry, it's those assholes who think harassing people is entertainment." But Bryn could see the strain starting to show. Sasha was defiant, yes, but even defiance had costs. There were dark circles under her eyes, suggesting poor sleep. She'd started eating lunch faster, as if eager to escape the public setting of the cafeteria. And while she never suggested they should stop being friends, never gave Bryn any indication she regretted their relationship, the weight of it all was clearly accumulating. The breaking point came on a Friday in mid-January, one of those grey winter days where the sun never quite seemed to rise fully. Bryn arrived at her locker between classes to find it standing open, which immediately set off alarms. She approached cautiously, and what she saw made her stomach drop. Her gym bag had been taken from her backpack where she'd stupidly left it unzipped, and its contents were displayed across her locker's interior and spilling onto the floor. The hand wraps she hadn't touched in months, the shin guards, the worn athletic tape, and most damning, most revealing, sitting propped against her textbooks, her black belt, the Japanese characters of her grandmother's dojo stitched into the fabric, next to several photographs she'd foolishly kept of tournament victories, where she stood on podiums wearing medals and fighting gear. Students passing in the hallway slowed to look, curious about the unusual items. Some took photos with their phones. Bryn heard whispers starting up, confused questions about why the quiet girl with the glasses had fighting equipment in her locker. She quickly shoved everything back into her locker, closed it, spun the combination lock. Her hands were shaking. In seconds her carefully maintained cover was compromised. Questions would be asked. The story she'd built about being physically incapable due to her vision problems, the excuse that had gotten her out of PE and allowed her to maintain her non-threatening persona, was now demonstrably false. "Interesting stuff in your locker," came Trent's voice from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the wall, that predatory smile on his face. "Makes a person wonder what else you've been lying about." "I haven't lied about anything," Bryn said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No? So you actually do need those glasses. You're actually as helpless as you pretend." He pushed off the wall, approached until he was standing close enough that she had to look up to maintain eye contact. "Or maybe you've been playing all of us this whole time." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." He reached out, and before she could react, he'd grabbed her glasses from her face. Bryn's hand shot up instinctively to catch them, fast enough that several students nearby gasped at the speed. But Trent had already pulled them back out of reach, holding them up to examine them in the fluorescent hallway lighting. "Interesting," he said slowly. "These lenses barely do anything. They're like what? The weakest prescription possible? Almost cosmetic." He looked at her with newfound understanding and rage. "You've been faking it, the whole helpless Four Eyes routine. What else have you been faking?" "Give those back," Bryn said, her voice harder now, some of the careful submission dropping away. "Or what?" Trent's smile widened. You going to make me? Use some of those martial arts moves from your little trophy photos. I'd love to see that. A crowd was gathering now, phones coming out. That electric anticipation in the air that preceded all high school confrontations. Bryn could see Sasha pushing through the crowd, concern written across her face. Kyle and Marcus appeared behind Trent, sensing entertainment and possible conflict. Just give them back, Bryn repeated. Please. I don't think so. Trent held the glasses higher, just out of reach. I think maybe these need to go somewhere else. Maybe we'll see how well you do without them. You claim you need them so badly, right? Let's find out. He turned and handed the glasses to Kyle, who immediately took off running down the hallway, laughing. Marcus blocked Bryn's path when she instinctively moved to follow, his bulk an immovable obstacle. Problem. Marcus grinned down at her. The hallway had gone quiet in that way crowds do when sensing real drama. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what the quiet girl would do now that her props had been taken, now that her supposed disability was revealed as exaggerated at minimum, if not entirely fabricated. Bryn stood very still, her vision actually clearer now without the cosmetic lenses. She could see every detail of Marcus's smug expression, could track Kyle disappearing around the corner, could see the mix of concern and fury on Sasha's face as she tried to push closer through the crowd. Without the glasses to hide behind, without the shield of her carefully constructed helplessness, she felt exposed and dangerous, a weapon with the safety removed. Move, she said quietly to Marcus. Make me, he replied, echoing Trent's taunt. For a long moment, Bryn didn't move. Then she made a decision that would change everything. She reached up, pulled off her hoodie in one smooth motion, revealing a plain black long-sleeve shirt underneath that actually showed her build for the first time. Without the shapeless, baggy clothes, it was obvious she wasn't the scrawny weakling she'd appeared to be. Her shoulders were developed, her arms lean with muscle. She stood differently, too, weight-balanced, posture-aligned, none of the hunched defensive positioning she'd maintained for months. Last chance, she said. Move. Marcus laughed, but there was uncertainty in it now. Around them, the crowd shifted, sensing something changing, phones recording now in anticipation. Then Trent made his second mistake of the day. You think you're tough now? Let's test that theory. He stepped forward and shoved her, both hands on her shoulders, hard enough that the old Bryn would have stumbled backward into the lockers. The new Bryn, the real Bryn, moved with fluid precision that made the shove meaningless. She stepped offline as the force came in, used minimal energy to redirect his momentum past her, and Trent stumbled forward into the space where she'd been. It wasn't dramatic or flashy. It was economical and practiced, and absolutely unmistakable in its competence. The hallway erupted in gasps and shouts. Trent spun around, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Marcus and Kyle, who had returned to watch the confrontation, moved to flank him, 3-on-1 now, and the crowd pressed back to give them space. You want to do this here, Trent said, his voice low and dangerous. In front of everyone? Bryn said nothing, just stood in a neutral, ready position, weight on the balls of her feet, hands loose at her sides. For the first time since arriving at Roosevelt, she wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending, wasn't diminishing herself to avoid conflict. For the first time in months, she felt like herself. You've been playing us this whole time, Trent continued, circling slightly, and she turned to keep him in her line of sight without appearing to. Acting helpless, making us look like bullies, when you could have fought back any time. Well, congratulations, Four Eyes, you got what you wanted. Everyone's watching now, so let's give them a show. He came at her fast, throwing a haymaker right hand that had power behind it but no technique. Bryn had seen 10,000 punches better than this one. She slipped it with minimal movement, just enough to make it miss by inches, and the force of his swing spun him partially around. The crowd roared. Marcus jumped in then, trying to grab her from behind, and Bryn dropped her weight, drove an elbow backward into his solar plexus with controlled precision. Not hard enough to cause serious injury, but hard enough to empty his lungs and send him staggering back, gasping. Kyle rushed her next, arms wide like he was going for a football tackle, and Bryn met him with a sprawl that any wrestler would recognize, stuffed his takedown attempt, used his momentum and position to execute a textbook lateral drop that put him flat on his back on the hallway floor. The impact echoed off the lockers. All of this happened in perhaps 5 seconds. Trent came at her again, this time with both hands trying to grab her shirt, and Bryn let him get a grip, only to immediately trap his hands against her, turned her hips, and executed a basic but beautiful judo throw that sent him tumbling to the floor beside Kyle. She maintained control of his arm, could have easily transitioned to an armbar, but instead released him and stepped back. "Stop," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the stunned hallway. "I don't want to hurt you. Any of you. This can end right now." Trent scrambled to his feet, his face purple with rage and humiliation. Behind him, students were screaming. Whether in excitement or alarm, Bryn couldn't tell. Somewhere in the crowd, she could hear Sasha shouting her name. The whole situation was spiraling, witnesses and phones and evidence of violence that couldn't be taken back. Marcus had recovered his breath and came at her from the side, trying to use his size advantage. Bryn didn't have room to maneuver in the packed hallway, so she met him head-on, ducked under his wild swing, drove her shoulder into his midsection, and used proper leverage to take him off his feet. 300 pounds of linebacker hit the floor with a crash that rattled the lockers. Kyle was up again, coming at her with more caution now, hands up like he'd seen in movies. Bryn waited, patient, and when he committed to a sloppy overhand right, she parried it, stepped in, and delivered 3 quick strikes to his torso, body shots that folded him over before stepping back again. No wasted movement, no excessive force, just efficient technique that neutralized the threat. "I said stop," she repeated. But Trent wasn't stopping. He grabbed a textbook from someone's fallen backpack and swung it at her head with genuinely dangerous intent. Bryn brought her arm up in a hard block that knocked it from his grip, then stepped in close and executed a foot sweep that put him on the ground for the 3rd time. This time when he went down, she followed, maintaining control, one hand on his collar and the other controlling his arm in a position that would be extremely uncomfortable if she applied pressure. She was mounted above him, completely dominant, and the position left no doubt about who was in control of this situation. "I could hurt you," she said quietly, speaking directly to Trent while the hallway held its collective breath. "I could dislocate this shoulder. I could break this arm. I could choke you unconscious in about 8 seconds. I've trained since I was 6 years old to do exactly these things. Do you understand?" Trent said nothing, but she could see the fear in his eyes now, the understanding that he'd fundamentally misjudged what he was dealing with. "I don't want to hurt you," Bryn continued. "I never wanted any of this. I came to Roosevelt trying to leave this part of my life behind. I could have stopped you the first time you shoved me, the second time, the 100th time. I chose not to, because I made a promise to someone I love that I wouldn't use violence unless there was no other choice." She released him and stood up, stepped back, giving him room. Around them, the crowd was absolutely silent now, hundreds of students frozen in this moment. "You kept pushing," Bryn said, addressing not just Trent but everyone watching. "You kept escalating. You stole my things, invaded my privacy, went after someone I care about. You backed me into a corner and left me no choice but to defend myself. So this is what that looks like." She reached down, extended her hand to help him up. Trent stared at it like it might be a trap, then looked up at her face, What he saw there must have convinced him she was serious, because he took her hand and let her pull him to his feet. "This ends now," she said. "No more. I won't be your victim, but I won't be your bully either. We're done." The silence stretched for another heartbeat, then broke as teachers finally pushed through the crowd. Mr. Henderson from chemistry and Coach Davis from the athletic department, both shouting for everyone to get to class. "Break it up. What's going on here?" Bryn stood in the center of the chaos, her breathing controlled despite the adrenaline, and caught Sasha's eyes across the crowd. Her friend looked shocked, awed, maybe a little scared, but also intensely proud. Sasha pushed through to her side, grabbed her hand and held on tight. "Holy shit," Sasha breathed. "Holy fucking shit, Bryn." "Language, Ms. Petrov," Coach Davis barked, finally reaching them. "Everyone involved in this altercation, principal's office now. The rest of you, class immediately, or you're all getting detention." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, everyone talking at once, phones still recording as students backed away. Bryn let herself be led toward the principal's office, Sasha still gripping her hand, Trent and his friends following behind, with considerably less swagger than usual. She'd broken her promise, revealed herself, used her training in anger, or something close to it. Everything she'd worked so hard to hide had been exposed in the most public way possible. But walking through those halls with Sasha's hand warm in hers, she couldn't find it in herself to regret it. Principal Michael's office was modern and aggressively beige, with motivational posters about perseverance and achievement covering the walls. Bryn sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, Sasha beside her refusing to let go of her hand, even when the secretary suggested she wait outside. Trent and his friends occupied the chairs opposite, maintaining as much distance as the small space allowed. Coach Davis stood by the door, looking deeply uncomfortable, while Mr. Henderson had gone to retrieve security footage. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Principal Michael said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. He was a thin man in his 50s, graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a tie that suggested he'd given up on being interesting decades ago. There was a physical altercation in the main hallway during class transition, multiple students involved, dozens of witnesses, and somehow none of the adults were present when it started. "We responded immediately when students alerted us," Coach Davis offered weakly, after how much had already happened. Michaels turned his attention to Bryn, and she met his gaze steadily. "Miss Callahan, you've been a student here for approximately 4 months. In that time, you've had no disciplinary issues whatsoever, excellent grades, quiet demeanor, no trouble. And today you assault 3 members of our football team in front of the entire student body. What exactly am I supposed to do with this?" "They stole my glasses," Bryn said quietly. "I asked for them back. They refused. Then Trent shoved me. I defended myself." "Defended yourself," Michaels repeated flatly. "By throwing 3 boys to the ground using what appears to be professional-level martial arts training. Training you somehow failed to mention when you submitted a doctor's note, claiming vision problems prevented you from participating in PE. "My vision is fine," Bryn admitted. "The note was, I wanted to avoid physical confrontation. I have training, yes. I didn't want to use it. Until today. Until I didn't have a choice anymore." Michaels turned to Trent, who was holding an ice pack to his shoulder where he'd hit the floor. "Mr. Ashford, your version of events." Trent's face cycled through several expressions before settling on a grieved innocence. "She's been weird since she got here. Today we found out she'd been lying about needing glasses, lying about her abilities. I confronted her about it and she went crazy. Attacked me and my friends for no reason." "No reason," Bryn said, her voice harder now. "You've been harassing me since my 2nd week at Roosevelt. Physical intimidation, theft, vandalism, social media harassment. You created an entire Instagram account to mock me and Sasha. You've made my life miserable for months. Today, you broke into my locker, stole my personal property, and publicly humiliated me. That's not no reason." "That's a serious accusation," Michael said. It's also true, Sasha cut in, ignoring the principal's sharp look. I've witnessed most of it. So have hundreds of other students. So have teachers who did nothing. Trent and his friends have been systematically bullying Bryn since October. Today she finally defended herself. If you're going to punish anyone, it should be them. Ms. Petrov, I don't recall asking for your input. Well, you're getting it anyway. This school has a zero-tolerance bullying policy that apparently doesn't apply to the football team. You want to talk about what happened today? Fine. But let's talk about what's been happening for months that your staff ignored. Michaels's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, Mr. Henderson returned with a laptop, security footage queued up. They all watched in uncomfortable silence as the hallway cameras showed the confrontation from multiple angles. The video clearly showed Trent taking Bryn's glasses, Kyle running off with them, Marcus blocking her path, and then Trent initiating physical contact with the shove. What followed was less clear due to camera angles and the crowd, but the end result was obvious. 3 boys on the ground, 1 girl standing. What the footage also captured, thanks to several cell phones visible in the crowd, was that this had been recorded from multiple angles by students. By now, it was probably all over social media. Jesus Christ, Michaels muttered, closing the laptop. This is going to be a nightmare. Coach, are any of your players seriously injured? Bruised egos, mostly, Coach Davis admitted. Nothing requiring medical attention, though Marcus is going to feel those body shots for a few days. And you? Michaels turned back to Bryn. Where exactly did you learn to fight like that? My grandmother ran a dojo. She taught traditional martial arts. I started training when I was 6. She passed away last summer, which is why I moved here. And you didn't think this was information the school should have? I didn't think it was relevant. I wasn't planning to use it. I wanted to leave that part of my life behind. Well, you certainly failed at that, Michaels said. Ms. Callahan, I'm suspending you for 3 days, pending a full investigation into this incident. Mr. Ashford, Mr. Morrison, Mr. Jennings, the same applies to you. I'll be contacting all your parents. I'll also be reviewing the harassment allegations. And if they prove credible, there will be additional consequences. Now all of you get out of my office while I figure out how to manage this disaster. That's bullshit, Sasha said hotly. She defended herself against Ms. Petrov. Unless you want to join them in suspension, I suggest you watch your language and leave my office. Now. They filed out into the main office area, where other students were conspicuously busy with tasks that let them watch the drama unfold. Bryn could feel their stares, the whispers starting up as soon as they passed. Trent and his friends exited through a different door without looking at her. 3 days! Sasha fumed as they walked toward their lockers. 3 days for defending yourself after months of harassment. That's complete bullshit. It's fine, Bryn said, though it wasn't fine. 3 days suspension would go on her record, could affect college applications, would require uncomfortable conversations with her guardians. It's not fine. None of this is fine, but... Sasha stopped walking, pulled Bryn to face her. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. Seriously, the way you moved, the control you had, the fact that you could have hurt them badly but didn't. That speech you gave Trent while you had him pinned. I'm pretty sure everyone in that hallway fell a little bit in love with you. Bryn felt her face flush. I broke my promise. I used my training. I became exactly what I didn't want to be. No, Sasha said firmly. You protected yourself. There's a difference. You showed restraint, mercy, even when you didn't have to. That's not becoming a bully. That's being strong enough to stay human even when you have power. They reached Bryn's locker, and she opened it to find her gym bag's contents had been returned, though slightly disheveled. Her glasses were sitting on top of her textbooks. Someone, probably a teacher, had gathered everything and put it back. She picked up the glasses, looked at them for a long moment, then put them in her bag instead of on her face. I don't need these anymore, she said quietly. Everyone knows now. Good, Sasha said. I prefer seeing your actual eyes anyway. They're really pretty, by the way. Grey like storm clouds. Bryn looked at her, this strange, fierce girl who'd decided to be her friend despite everything, who'd stood beside her through harassment and humiliation, who was looking at her right now with an expression that made Bryn's chest tight. "Sasha," she started, then stopped, unsure how to continue. "Yeah? Thank you. For everything, for being my friend when no one else would, for not running away when things got bad, for not being scared of me now." "Scared of you?" Sasha laughed. "Bryn, I've been scared for you. There's a difference. And honestly, seeing you stand up for yourself, seeing you strong and confident and not taking anyone's shit, that's not scary. That's kind of—" She trailed off, seemed to be deciding something, then stepped closer. "That's kind of incredibly attractive." The hallway noise faded to background static. Bryn stood very still, her bag hanging from one hand, her heart beating against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "Sasha, I know this is terrible timing. You're suspended, there's going to be drama, everything's complicated, but I need you to know that this—" She gestured between them. "What I feel for you isn't just friendship anymore. It hasn't been for a while. And if you don't feel the same way, that's okay. We can forget I said anything. But if you do feel something, then I need you to tell me, because watching you fight for yourself today made me realize life's too short to not fight for what you want." Bryn looked at Sasha's face, open and vulnerable and brave in a way that had nothing to do with physical courage. She thought about all the walls she'd built, all the truths she'd hidden, all the ways she'd made herself smaller to avoid being hurt. She'd spent months protecting herself from external threats while building the biggest threat internally, the kind of isolation that came from never letting anyone really see you. "I feel the same way," she said, the words simple and terrifying and true. "I have for weeks, maybe longer. I was just scared to say it." Sasha's smile could have lit the entire building. Yeah. So when you get back from suspension, maybe we could go somewhere. Not just lunch in the art building, but like an actual date." "I'd like that," Bryn said, and found herself smiling despite everything, despite the suspension and the confrontation and the uncertain future. "I'd really like that." They stood there grinning at each other like idiots until someone walking past deliberately coughed to get their attention, and they both laughed, the tension breaking. Bryn gathered her things, including the gym bag she'd kept hidden for so long, and they walked out of Roosevelt together into the cold January afternoon. The 3-day suspension was simultaneously eternal and too brief. Bryn spent the time in her small apartment, catching up on homework, avoiding her guardian's disappointed lectures about violence and school rules, and processing everything that had happened. Her phone exploded with messages from numbers she didn't recognize, some supportive, some critical, many just curious. The video from the hallway had indeed gone viral, at least within Roosevelt's student body, and had apparently migrated to TikTok and Instagram, where students from other schools were weighing in on the drama. Sasha texted constantly, providing updates from inside Roosevelt's walls. The Instagram account that had been targeting them had been deleted, whether by its creators or by Instagram's moderation, Sasha couldn't confirm. Trent and his friends were also suspended, facing additional disciplinary review for the harassment campaign once Principal Michaels interviewed multiple witnesses. Several students had come forward with their own stories of bullying, some dating back years. The football coach was reportedly furious that his star players had gotten themselves suspended right before playoffs. Teachers were being questioned about why they'd failed to intervene earlier. "You've basically restructured the entire social hierarchy in one day," Sasha texted on day 2. "People are talking about you like you're some kind of vigilante superhero. It's absurd and kind of awesome." "I just wanted them to leave me alone," Bryn replied. "Well, mission accomplished. Nobody's going to fuck with you now, or with me by extension. There are some benefits to being friends with the girl who made the football team look like toddlers." I didn't make them look like anything. They did that themselves. True. Hey, what are you doing Friday night? Returning to school in shame and humiliation. After that, want to catch a movie, as a date, an official one. And Bryn stared at her phone for a long moment, feeling the flutter of something warm and nervous and exciting in her chest. Yes, definitely yes. Good. It's a date. When Bryn returned to Roosevelt on Thursday, she wasn't sure what to expect. Part of her anticipated hostility, resentment from Trent's friends and supporters. Instead, she found something more complex and harder to navigate. Respect mixed with wariness. Curiosity blended with uncertainty. Students moved aside in the hallways as she passed, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. Some nodded at her. A few actually said hello. Several stopped her to say they'd wished they'd spoken up sooner, that they were sorry for standing by while she was harassed. A sophomore girl she'd never spoken to before approached her near her locker. "What you did was brave," the girl said quietly. "I've been dealing with some stuff too, and seeing you stand up for yourself made me realize I don't have to just take it. So thank you." Bryn didn't know what to say to that, so she settled for, "You deserve to be safe at school. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't." The girl nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. Sasha appeared beside her moments later, slipping her hand into Bryn's with a casualness that suggested they'd been doing this for years. "Ready for English?" Sasha asked. "Mrs. Kowalski's probably going to make some pointed comments about how literature helps us understand conflict resolution." "Can't wait," Bryn said dryly. And they walked to class together, hands linked, while other students watched with interest, but notably without mockery. The whispers followed Bryn through the day, but they were different now, curious rather than cruel, impressed rather than disdainful. When she sat in the cafeteria for lunch, actually sat at a table in the open rather than hiding in the library, several students asked if they could join her and Sasha. They said yes, and suddenly they had a small group, misfits and art kids and quiet academic types who'd been doing their own versions of staying invisible. "This is weird," Bryn murmured to Sasha between bites of her sandwich. "I went from complete outcast to apparently the person everyone wants to sit with. It's been 4 days." "You broke the spell," Sasha said. "Trent had social power because everyone was scared of him. You showed that he's not actually untouchable. Now everyone's recalibrating. I didn't do it to change social dynamics. I just wanted to defend myself. I know. That's why it worked. If you'd been showboating or aggressive, people would have just seen another bully. But you were defending yourself with restraint and mercy. That's different. That's admirable." Bryn wasn't sure she agreed, but she didn't argue. Across the cafeteria, she could see Trent and his friends at their usual table, but the crowd around them had thinned considerably. Kyle was scrolling through his phone, ignoring everyone. Marcus was eating in determined silence. Trent looked up once, made eye contact with Bryn across the busy cafeteria, and something complicated passed between them. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but perhaps acknowledgement. He looked away first. Friday's date was perfect in its awkwardness and honesty. They saw a horror movie that was more funny than frightening, shared popcorn, and whispered commentary that earned shushing from other moviegoers. Afterward, they walked through downtown Philadelphia, talking about everything and nothing, their breath visible in the cold February air. Sasha reached for Bryn's hand as they walked, and Bryn held on tight. "I'm really glad you moved to Roosevelt," Sasha said. "Even with all the garbage you had to deal with. Is that selfish?" "Maybe a little," Bryn said, "but I'm glad too. I didn't expect to find you when I came here." "What did you expect?" "To disappear, to be nobody, to leave behind everything I used to be and just survive until graduation. And now," Bryn thought about it, "now I think maybe I can be someone. Not who I was before, but not nobody either. Someone in between." "I like in between Bryn," Sasha said. "She's pretty great." They kissed for the first time standing outside the movie theater, a brief, soft press of lips that sent warmth cascading through Bryn's entire body. When they pulled apart, Sasha was smiling so wide it looked like it might hurt. "Worth waiting for," she said. "Definitely worth it," Bryn agreed. The weeks following moved with strange velocity, time compressed by happiness and healing. Trent and his friends returned from their suspension chastened, facing additional consequences that included mandatory counseling and community service. The school administration, under pressure from parents and the threat of potential lawsuits, implemented new anti-bullying protocols and mandatory training for staff on intervention strategies. It was too late to help Bryn, but it might help the next victim. Bryn and Sasha became an established couple, navigating the complexity of young relationship with the same determination they'd shown during the harassment. They studied together, attended school events together, spent weekends exploring Philadelphia's art museums and bookstores and music venues. When Sasha had a particularly rough day dealing with her own family drama, Bryn would listen without trying to fix everything. When Bryn had nightmares about her grandmother, or moments where the weight of her suspension felt crushing, Sasha would sit with her until the feelings passed. "You know what's interesting?" Sasha said one afternoon in late March. They were at their usual spot by the art building, the weather finally warming enough to sit outside comfortably. "I spend all this time thinking about how I rescued you, but I'm starting to think you rescued me too." "How do you figure?" Bryn asked. "I was so focused on being independent, on not needing anyone, on proving I was above all the high school drama. I'd convinced myself that being alone made me strong, but being with you taught me that real strength includes letting people in, trusting someone, being vulnerable." She paused. "You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you need someone." "You taught me something too," Bryn said, "that hiding isn't the same as healing, that running from your past doesn't actually escape it, that the things we're most scared of showing people are sometimes the things they need to see." They sat in comfortable silence, watching other students mill around the courtyard, the constant motion of teenage life continuing around them. Bryn saw Marcus walking with his girlfriend, looking significantly less intimidating in a Roosevelt Drama Club t-shirt. Apparently, he'd joined as part of his community service and discovered a talent for backstage work. Kyle waved at them as he passed, a tentative gesture that Bryn returned with equal uncertainty. Whatever friendship might eventually develop between them would be complicated and probably strained, but at least it wasn't actively hostile anymore. And then there was Trent. The change in him was subtle but undeniable. He no longer commanded the central social territory of Roosevelt. His voice in the hallways wasn't quite as loud. His confidence seemed less automatic, more considered. He'd stopped Bryn in the hallway the previous week, an interaction she'd braced for with tension in every muscle. "Can we talk?" he'd asked. "Somewhere private." They'd ended up in an empty classroom after school, the space feeling too large for the conversation they needed to have. Trent had stood near the windows, arms crossed defensively, before seeming to deliberately uncross them. "I want to apologize," he said, the words clearly difficult. "For everything. The harassment, the Instagram account, the physical stuff. All of it. I was an asshole." Bryn had waited, sensing he had more to say. "My dad played football at Penn State, made it to the NFL practice squad before he blew out his knee. He's been riding me since I could walk to be better than him, to succeed where he failed. The pressure, the expectations, the constant criticism when I wasn't perfect." He'd looked down at his hands. "I took all that anger and pressure and dumped it on people I perceived as weaker. Made myself feel powerful by making others feel small. That's pathetic. You were right about what you said that day. I was cruel, and I'm sorry." "Okay," Bryn had said simply. Trent had looked up, surprised. "That's it?" Just okay? What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? Maybe eventually, but not yet. The damage you did doesn't just disappear because you apologize. But I appreciate the apology. I appreciate you acknowledging what you did. That's a start. I understand, he'd said. For what it's worth, I'm trying to be better. Seeing a counselor, talking about the pressure, trying to find healthier ways to deal with stress. I know that doesn't undo anything, but I'm trying. Then keep trying, Bryn had told him. Keep working on it. Be better tomorrow than you are today. That's all any of us can do. He'd nodded, offered his hand, and after a moment's consideration, she'd shaken it. The handshake had been brief and formal, not friendship, but perhaps the beginning of mutual understanding. Now, sitting in the warming March sun with Sasha's shoulder pressed against hers, Bryn thought about transformation, about how people could change if they chose to, but only if they did the difficult internal work. About how forgiveness wasn't forgetting, but it might be accepting that people were complex and capable of growth. You're thinking very hard about something, Sasha observed. Want to share? Just thinking about change, Bryn said. About how I came here, trying to leave everything behind, but maybe what I really needed was to integrate it. The fighter and the student, the strong and the vulnerable, the past and the present. Very philosophical. Did you eat a fortune cookie? Bryn laughed, nudging Sasha with her shoulder. Shut up. Make me, Sasha challenged, grinning. You know I can, Bryn replied, matching her grin. Yeah, but you won't. Because you're too busy being disgustingly in love with me. I don't recall saying I was in love with you. You didn't have to. I can see it in your face every time you look at me. Those pretty grey eyes give everything away. Bryn felt her face flush, but she didn't deny it. They'd been dating for almost 2 months now, and while neither had said the actual words yet, they both knew what was building between them. Something real and important, and worth protecting. Maybe I am, she said quietly. In love with you, I mean. Sasha's teasing expression softened into something tender. Yeah. Good, Sasha said, intertwining their fingers. Because I'm definitely in love with you. Have been for a while now. They kissed there in the afternoon sunlight, unbothered by anyone walking past, secure in the knowledge that they'd earned this peace through surviving everything that had tried to break them. When they pulled apart, Bryn felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced since before her grandmother's death. The semester wound toward its conclusion with the inexorable momentum of spring. Bryn maintained her excellent grades, applied to colleges, with Sasha spending hours helping her craft essays. Her suspension had been noted on her record, but when the full context was explained, admissions counselors at several schools actually commented that her handling of the situation demonstrated maturity and restraint. The martial arts background that she'd hidden for so long became, in the retelling, evidence of discipline and dedication rather than something shameful. She'd even started training again, finding a small dojo in Center City that taught traditional Japanese martial arts similar to what her grandmother had practiced. The instructors there treated her with respect once they saw her move, and she found that returning to the discipline didn't bring back the anger and loss of control she'd feared. Instead, it felt like reconnecting with a part of herself she'd been missing. She trained hard 3 evenings a week, working combinations on heavy bags and sparring with partners who could actually challenge her, and came home tired and satisfied and whole. Sasha would sometimes watch from the observation area, sketching in her notebook while Bryn trained. Afterward, they'd grab food and Bryn would be loose and relaxed in a way that made Sasha smile. You look happy, Sasha observed one evening over Vietnamese food. Training makes you glow. I'd forgotten how much I love it, Bryn admitted. For so long I associated it with what went wrong, with losing control. But it's not the training's fault I made bad choices. The discipline, the movement, the challenge of it. That's all still beautiful. You should consider teaching someday, Sasha suggested. You'd be amazing at it, patient, knowledgeable, understanding about the mental aspects. Maybe, Bryn said, considering. My grandmother always said teaching was how you gave back to the art, how you honored those who taught you. Maybe that's something I could do eventually. I think she'd be proud of you, Sasha said softly, of how you handled everything this year, of the person you're becoming. Bryn felt tears prick her eyes, but didn't try to hide them. I hope so. I think about her every day. About what she'd say about all this. About you. What do you think she'd say about me? That you're fierce in all the ways that matter. That you see clearly through bullshit and artifice. That you make me better by challenging me to be honest. Bryn reached across the table to take Sasha's hand. She'd like you a lot. I wish I could have met her. Me too. Prom arrived with its traditional fanfare and drama. Sasha had initially dismissed it as heteronormative pageantry nonsense, but Bryn had surprised her by actually wanting to go, by wanting to dress up and be publicly affectionate and claim space in Roosevelt's social traditions as openly queer and visibly happy. You want to go to prom? Sasha had asked, incredulous. You, who spent months trying to be invisible. Exactly, Bryn had replied. I spent months hiding. Now I want to exist loudly. I want to dance with you in front of everyone. I want to show up as ourselves and be undeniably present. Is that weird? It's not weird at all, Sasha had said, her eyes going soft. It's actually perfect. They'd gone dress shopping together, Bryn choosing a sleek black suit with a silver vest that made her look sharp and confident, while Sasha found a vintage emerald dress that complemented her dark hair beautifully. On prom night, they arrived together to stares and whispers, but this time the attention felt different, admiring rather than mocking, curious rather than cruel. They danced together on the gymnasium floor that had once held Bryn's worst confrontation, reclaiming the space with their happiness. Other couples joined them, gay and straight, making a vibrant mosaic of Roosevelt's student body. Trent was there with his long-term girlfriend, and when their paths crossed near the punch bowl, he nodded respectfully at both of them. Not friendship, but civility. Growth, however, incremental. This is kinda perfect, Sasha said, swaying with Bryn to a slow song, her arms around Bryn's neck. All of it, this moment. US, how far we've come. It's not perfect, Bryn corrected gently. Perfect would mean nothing bad happened, but it's real. We survived something difficult and came out stronger. That's better than perfect. You're such a philosopher, Sasha teased, then grew serious. I love you. I know I said it before, but I want to say it now, here, where everyone can see. I love you. I love you too, Bryn said, and kissed her there in the middle of the gymnasium, in front of hundreds of their peers, claiming their happiness publicly and without apology. The kiss was met with some scattered applause, a few cheers, and the general sense that Roosevelt High School was, however gradually, learning to be a place where different kinds of love could coexist. Graduation came with the swift inevitability of spring turning to summer. Bryn walked across the stage to receive her diploma, heard Sasha's distinctive cheer from the crowd, and felt the weight of the year settling into memory rather than present trauma. She'd done it, survived, thrived, transformed from victim to victor to simply person, complex and flawed and working towards something better. At the graduation party Sasha's parents hosted, Bryn found herself in conversation with several classmates who'd witnessed or participated in her harassment earlier in the year. Some apologized again, others simply acknowledged the strangeness of the journey they'd all been on. Marcus, of all people, approached with genuine warmth. Hey, he said, beer in hand, despite being underage. I just wanted to say, that I learned a lot this year. From you, about not being a follower. about thinking for myself. I'm going to state in the fall for theatre tech, first person in my family to go to college, partly because of you. Because of me? Bryn was genuinely confused. You made me realize I didn't have to be what Trent expected, that I could choose something different. Theatre was always interesting to me, but it wasn't cool, you know? Then I saw you not giving a shit about being cool, just being yourself, and I thought maybe I could do that too. So thanks. You're welcome, Bryn said, still processing. Good luck at state. You too. Heard you're going to Penn for pre-med? That's huge. Biomedical engineering, actually. But yeah, pretty excited about it. Gonna keep training? Always, Bryn said simply. It's part of who I am. Just took me a while to accept that. As the party continued around them, Bryn found Sasha on the back porch, looking up at the stars barely visible through Philadelphia's light pollution. She slipped her arms around Sasha's waist from behind, rested her chin on her shoulder. Happy? Sasha asked. Yeah, Bryn said honestly. Scared about the future, sad about leaving, worried about long distance since you'll be at RISD, but happy. We'll make it work, Sasha said with the confidence of someone who'd already decided. 4 hours isn't that far. We survived hell together. We can survive some highway miles. Dramatic much? Always. It's part of my charm. They stood there watching the night sky, two young women who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Below them, their classmates celebrated. The complicated social ecosystem of Roosevelt High School beginning its final dissolution as everyone prepared to scatter toward their futures. Bryn thought about the girl she'd been in October, scared and hiding, and trying desperately to erase entire parts of herself to survive. She thought about that first day walking into Roosevelt with thick glasses and hunched shoulders, determined to be nobody special, nobody worthy of attention, nobody who would attract danger. She'd succeeded in being noticed anyway, had been targeted and harassed and pushed to her breaking point, but she'd also found unexpected things. Friendship that became love, strength in vulnerability, the understanding that true power wasn't about dominating others, but about maintaining humanity even when you had the capacity for violence. She'd learned that transformation was possible, that people could change and grow and become better versions of themselves if they chose to do the work. Most importantly, she'd learned that the parts of herself she'd tried to suppress, the fighter and the disciplined martial artist and the girl who'd made mistakes but learned from them, weren't separate from who she wanted to be. They were integrated parts of a complex whole, and pretending otherwise had only made her weaker. "What are you thinking about?" Sasha asked, turning in her arms to face her. "Everything," Bryn said. "Nothing. The year. How different everything is from how it started. Regret any of it?" Bryn considered the question seriously. The harassment, the fear, the confrontation, the suspension, the pain of being targeted and the difficulty of standing up for herself, the weight of using her training and the fear that she'd become something she hated. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. I wish it hadn't happened. But I don't regret how I handled it. I tried peace first. I showed restraint even when I had power. I proved to myself that I could be strong without being cruel. That matters." "It does matter," Sasha agreed. "You inspired a lot of people, you know. Not just me, though definitely me, but other students who were dealing with their own stuff. You showed them that victims don't have to stay victims, that standing up for yourself doesn't require losing your humanity, that mercy can be stronger than revenge. That's a lot to put on one person." "Lucky you're strong enough to carry it," Sasha said, kissing her softly. "Among your many other talents, such as, well, you're very good at kissing for starters." "Am I?" Bryn grinned, leaning in closer. "Want me to demonstrate further research?" "I think that would be scientifically necessary." They kissed there on the porch while their classmates celebrated inside, the future stretching out before them, uncertain but no longer frightening. They'd faced their monsters and survived, separately and together. Whatever came next, they'd handle it the same way, with courage, with honesty, and with the understanding that strength came in many forms. The summer passed in a blur of preparation and goodbyes. Bryn visited her grandmother's grave regularly, sitting in the grass beside the headstone and talking about everything that had happened. She told her about Sasha, about the confrontation, about finding her way back to training. She apologized for breaking her promise about avoiding violence, but explained why she'd had no choice. She asked forgiveness even knowing none was needed, the ritual itself providing closure. In August, her guardians helped her move into her dorm at Penn. The campus was beautiful, historic buildings and green quads, and the constant motion of students from everywhere. Her roommate was a pre-med student from California, friendly and organized and respectful of boundaries. Bryn unpacked her belongings, hanging photos of her grandmother and of Sasha on the wall, setting up her desk and organizing her books. In the bottom of her moving boxes, she found her black belt from her grandmother's dojo. She held it for a long moment, running her fingers over the worn fabric and faded stitching, the physical weight of years of discipline and dedication. Then she hung it on a hook beside her desk, where she'd see it every day. Not hidden, not displayed aggressively, just present, part of her life. Integrated. Sasha arrived at Penn for the weekend before heading to RISD, and they explored Philadelphia together, walking hand in hand through Reading Terminal Market, visiting the Philadelphia Museum of Art, kissing on park benches without caring who saw. They talked about their fears and excitements about college, about maintaining their relationship across distance, about futures that felt simultaneously too close and impossibly far away. On Sasha's last night before leaving, they lay together in Bryn's narrow dorm bed, intertwined and comfortable, listening to the sounds of the campus at night. "You're going to be amazing here," Sasha said quietly. "I can feel it. This is where you're supposed to be." "You're going to be amazing at RISD," Bryn replied. "Your art is going to change the world." "We're both going to be amazing," Sasha declared, "and we're going to survive the distance because we're stubborn and in love, and we've already survived worse." "Facts," Bryn agreed, pulling her closer. "Promise me something," Sasha said after a moment. "What?" "Keep training. Keep being honest about who you are. Don't hide anymore. You spent so long trying to be invisible, and look what that cost you. Be visible, be present, be unapologetically yourself." "I promise," Bryn said. "Same to you. Keep making art that challenges people. Keep being fierce and opinionated and brilliant. Don't let anyone dim your light." "Deal," Sasha said, and sealed it with a kiss. The semester started with the overwhelming complexity of college. Harder classes, more independence, new social dynamics to navigate. Bryn threw herself into her biomedical engineering coursework, fascinated by the intersection of biology and mechanics, by the possibility of creating prosthetics and medical devices that could improve lives. She continued training at the dojo in Center City, earning respect from senior students and instructors with her skill and dedication. She joined the campus LGBTQ organization, attended meetings and events, built a community of people who understood different facets of her identity, and she stayed in constant contact with Sasha. They video called multiple times a week, texted constantly, visited each other monthly, despite the distance. The relationship deepened rather than weakened with separation, both of them learning to communicate better, to support each other's individual growth while maintaining their connection. In November, Bryn received a message through social media from someone she hadn't expected to hear from, that sophomore girl who'd approached her at Roosevelt after the confrontation. The message was brief but meaningful. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did last year. You helped me find the courage to report my situation, and things got better. I'm a junior now and actually happy at school. I know you probably don't remember me, but you changed my life. Thank you." Bryn read the message multiple times, feeling tears prick her eyes. She'd been so focused on her own survival, her own transformation, that she hadn't fully grasped the ripple effects of her actions. That speech she'd given while standing over Trent in the hallway, that display of strength tempered with mercy, had meant something to people watching, had inspired courage in others, had suggested that standing up for yourself was possible, even when it seemed hopeless. She showed the message to Sasha during their next video call. "See?" Sasha said, her face pixelated but her smile clear. "You're a superhero. I've been saying this. I'm not a superhero. I just defended myself. You did it with restraint and humanity. That's what makes it matter. Anyone can hit back. Not everyone can hit back with control and still show mercy. That's the lesson. That's what people remember." Bryn thought about her grandmother's teachings, the emphasis on discipline and restraint, the understanding that martial arts weren't about hurting people, but about developing character. Her grandmother had tried to teach her that power without wisdom was dangerous, that true strength included knowing when not to fight. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, but she'd learned it. Spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities. Bryn declared her major officially, started working in a research lab studying prosthetic nerve interfaces, and continued excelling in her classes. She competed in a martial arts tournament, her first in years, and placed third despite being rusty from time away from competition. The loss bothered her less than she expected. The joy of competing, of testing herself against skilled opponents, was its own reward. Sasha visited for a long weekend in April, and they explored more of Philadelphia together, older now and more confident in themselves and their relationship. They talked about summer plans, about the possibility of getting an apartment together in Philadelphia after graduation, about futures that felt less theoretical and more within reach. "I can see it, you know," Sasha said as they walked through Rittenhouse Square. "Our life together. You designing medical devices, me doing graphic design or illustration, an apartment with good light for my work, near your dojo so you can train, maybe a cat, definitely a lot of books, Sunday mornings drinking coffee and reading the paper. It feels real." "It feels real to me too," Bryn admitted. "Scary but real." "Why scary?" "Because wanting something this much means it can hurt if I lose it." "You're not going to lose it," Sasha said firmly. "You're not going to lose me. We're going to build that life together, and it's going to be messy and complicated and beautiful, just like we are." Bryn pulled her in for a kiss, right there in the square, not caring about the other people enjoying the spring afternoon. They'd earned this certainty, this public affection, this freedom to exist as themselves without apology. The end of her first year at Penn brought reflection and assessment. Bryn had survived and thrived, building a new life that integrated all the parts of herself she'd once tried to separate. She was an engineering student, a martial artist, a girlfriend, a friend, a mentor to younger students, a work in progress constantly evolving toward something better. She thought about Roosevelt and everything that had happened there with increasing distance and perspective. The harassment that had felt overwhelming at the time was now just one chapter in a larger story. Trent and Marcus and Kyle were people she'd probably never see again, their impact on her life diminishing with each passing month. Even the confrontation, which had felt world-ending at the time, was simply a moment where she'd defended herself with skill and shown mercy when she had power. The real story wasn't about the bullying or the fight. It was about learning to integrate all her parts into a coherent whole, about accepting that she could be strong and vulnerable, disciplined and imperfect, peaceful and capable of violence when necessary, about understanding that hiding parts of yourself to avoid conflict only created internal conflict instead. She called Sasha late one night in May, unable to sleep, wanting to hear her voice. "Can't sleep," Sasha answered, sounding alert despite the late hour. "Just thinking." "About?" "Everything. The year, U.S. Roosevelt. How different everything is now. Better different or worse different?" "Definitely better," Bryn said without hesitation. "I'm happy, Sash. Really happy. I didn't think I would be after everything that happened, but I am." "That's because you did the work," Sasha said. "You faced your trauma, integrated your past, built new relationships, stayed true to yourself. You earned this happiness." "We earned it," Bryn corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "We make a good team." "The best team," Bryn agreed. They talked until dawn, about nothing and everything, the conversation meandering through topics, the way only truly comfortable relationships allow. By the time they hung up, the sun was rising over Philadelphia, and Bryn felt centered and grateful and ready for whatever came next. Summer brought construction work at a lab on campus, allowing Bryn to stay in Philadelphia and spend more time with Sasha, who'd found an internship at a design firm. They fell into domestic rhythms, cooking together in Sasha's apartment, movie nights, visits to the dojo where Sasha would sketch while Bryn trained, lazy mornings and passionate nights. It felt like a preview of the life they'd build together eventually, and both found themselves settling into it with ease. On a particularly hot August afternoon, they returned to Roosevelt. Not for any official reason, but because Sasha wanted to photograph the building for an art project about transformation and space. They walked the empty hallways during summer break, the building strange without students, their footsteps echoing. They stood in the main hallway where the confrontation had happened, and Bryn felt the memory of it wash over her, the fear and adrenaline, the moment of decision when she stopped hiding, the strange satisfaction of finally being seen fully, the choice to show mercy when she could have chosen cruelty. "This is where it happened," she said unnecessarily. "How does it feel being back?" Sasha asked, camera in hand but not photographing yet. "Strange. Smaller than I remember. Less significant." Bryn turned in a slow circle, taking in the space. "This hallway felt like the center of the world that day. Now it's just a hallway. Not special, not scary, just a space where something important happened once." "That's growth," Sasha observed. "When your trauma loses its power over you, when the places that haunted you become just places again." "Take your photos," Bryn said. "Capture it while we're here." Sasha photographed the hallway from multiple angles, the empty lockers and scuffed floors and fluorescent lights. Then she turned the camera on Bryn, catching her in profile, in the exact spot where she'd stood when Trent shoved her, and everything changed. "You look different than you did then," Sasha said, reviewing the digital image. "Taller somehow, more solid, like you take up more space." "I do take up more space," Bryn said. "I'm not trying to disappear anymore. I'm trying to be present. There's a difference." They left Roosevelt together, walking out into the bright summer afternoon, and Bryn didn't look back. That chapter was closed. The lessons remained, the growth continued, but the place itself held no power over her anymore. Her second year at Penn began with confidence and clarity. She moved into a better dorm, took on more challenging coursework, continued her research work and her training. She started volunteering as a mentor in the Women's Self-Defense program on campus, teaching basic techniques to students who wanted to feel safer. The work was rewarding in ways she hadn't anticipated, watching confidence grow in women who'd felt vulnerable, seeing them claim physical space and power. During one of these classes, a student asked her why she'd started learning martial arts. "My grandmother," Bryn said simply. She believed everyone should know how to protect themselves. But she also believed that true martial arts weren't about fighting. They were about discipline, respect, understanding your body, developing character. The ability to defend yourself was just one aspect of a much larger system of growth. Have you ever had to use it? Another student asked. Like, for real? Once, Bryn admitted. I was being bullied in high school. Multiple students, ongoing harassment. I tried everything else first, ignoring it, avoiding confrontation, reporting to teachers. Nothing worked. Eventually I had to defend myself physically. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was necessary. What happened? I defended myself with restraint. I neutralized the threat without causing permanent damage. And then, when I had complete power over the situation, I chose mercy instead of revenge. That choice mattered more than any technique I used. The students absorbed this quietly, and Bryn could see them processing the complexity of it. Violence as a last resort, power wielded with restraint, strength that included the capacity for mercy. This was her grandmother's legacy, she realized. Not just the techniques, but the philosophy. The understanding that physical capability was meaningless without moral foundation. That true strength meant choosing not to fight when possible, but being able to fight when necessary. That victory without vengeance was the highest achievement. She thought her grandmother would be proud of how she'd finally learned those lessons, even if the learning had been painful. Thanksgiving brought Bryn and Sasha together at Sasha's family home outside Boston. They'd been dating for almost 2 years now, the relationship stable and deep and comfortable in all the best ways. Sasha's parents, who'd met Bryn multiple times, treated her like family, giving them knowing looks when they disappeared to Sasha's room and tactfully not commenting. Over Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by Sasha's loud, affectionate family, Bryn felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since her grandmother's death. This was what family could be, chaotic and loving and accepting, a place where you could be fully yourself without fear. Thank you, she told Sasha later, curled up in her childhood bed, for this, for them, for making space for me in your life. You're not in the space, Sasha corrected. You are the space. My life is built around you now, in a good way, in the I can't imagine my future without you in it way. That's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Most good things are, Sasha said wisely, then ruined the moment by tickling Bryn's ribs until they were both laughing too hard to be serious. The relationship deepened through the remainder of their college years. They visited each other constantly despite the distance, supported each other through academic stress and creative blocks and existential crises. They fought occasionally, learning how to argue productively and forgive sincerely. They grew together and individually, becoming more fully themselves while building something larger than either person alone. Bryn continued her engineering studies with passion, her research into prosthetic nerve interfaces showing real promise. She continued training, earning advanced rank in her dojo and competing occasionally in tournaments. She mentored younger students, teaching both martial arts and academic skills. She built a life that honored all her parts, the fighter, the student, the girlfriend, the friend, the work in progress. And she thought about Roosevelt less and less frequently, the memories fading from sharp to soft-edged, from trauma to simply part of her history. She'd been tested there and survived, had discovered her strength and her capacity for mercy, had found Sasha in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The real victory, she came to understand, wasn't in the confrontation itself. It was in what came after, in choosing to integrate rather than compartmentalize, in refusing to become the thing she'd fought against, in showing that power without compassion was hollow, but compassion without strength was vulnerable. True strength, she learned, was complex. It was defending yourself when necessary but showing restraint when possible. It was standing up for others, even when it was uncomfortable. It was being vulnerable with people you trusted and setting boundaries with people you didn't. It was acknowledging your past without being controlled by it. It was building a future that honored all your parts, instead of suppressing the ones that scared you. That was the lesson Roosevelt had taught her, though the learning had been painful and difficult and had cost more than she'd wanted to pay. But she'd survived, thrived, transformed. And that, ultimately, was the victory that mattered most. Years later, after graduating from Penn with honors and starting a PhD program in biomedical engineering, Bryn would sometimes tell the story of Roosevelt to people who asked about the scar above her eyebrow or the black belt hanging in her office. She'd explain about the bullying, the confrontation, the choice to show mercy when she had power. The interesting thing, she'd say, is that everyone remembers the fight. But I remember what came after, the hard work of healing, the choice to not let cruelty make me cruel, the decision to be vulnerable with Sasha despite every instinct screaming to protect myself. That's where the real courage was, not in the physical confrontation, but in the emotional openness that followed. Do you regret any of it? People would ask. And Bryn would think about that year, about the fear and pain and ultimate transformation. She'd think about Sasha, who she'd found in those dark months and built a life with. She'd think about the students she'd inspired, the people she'd helped through her self-defense classes, the ripple effects of choosing mercy over vengeance. No, she'd say finally. I don't regret it. I wish it hadn't happened, but I don't regret how I handled it. It taught me who I am, who I want to be. That's worth the cost. And she'd mean it because the girl who'd walked into Roosevelt trying to disappear had become a woman who existed fully and unapologetically, who integrated strength with compassion, discipline with creativity, independence with connection, who understood that true victory meant staying human, even when you had the power to be monstrous. That was the story. Not of a victim who became a victor, but of a person who learned to be whole, who discovered that the parts of yourself you try hardest to hide are sometimes the parts that need most to be seen, who found that mercy was stronger than revenge, that vulnerability required more courage than violence, that being truly seen was terrifying and necessary and ultimately liberating. Bryn Callahan had fought one fight in a high school hallway, but she'd won a much larger battle with herself. And that victory, earned through difficulty and growth and the determination to be better than her worst moments, was the triumph that defined her. She walked through the world now with clear eyes, no longer hidden behind cosmetic lenses. She moved with confidence earned through discipline and testing. She loved openly, grateful for the person who'd seen her fully and chosen to stay. She taught with patience, passing forward the wisdom her grandmother had given her. And when students asked her what the most important lesson was, what they should remember above all else, she would smile and say, "True strength means knowing when to fight and when to show mercy. It means defending yourself without losing your humanity. It means understanding that power without compassion is just another form of cruelty. The hardest battles aren't with external enemies, but with the darkness inside yourself. Win that fight, and everything else becomes possible." That was the lesson Roosevelt had taught her. That was the wisdom worth sharing. That was the story worth telling. And Bryn, standing in her lab at Penn, working on devices that would help people walk again, training at her dojo with students who looked up to her, loving Sasha with all the complicated, beautiful intensity of a relationship built on genuine partnership, living fully and unapologetically, as all her parts integrated into a coherent whole, was living proof that transformation was possible. That mercy could triumph without weakness. That strength could exist without cruelty, that the most powerful victory was the one where you refused to become your enemy. She'd learned to fight blind, without the glasses she'd hidden behind for so long. But more importantly, she'd learned to see clearly, to see herself, her capacity for both violence and restraint, her need for both independence and connection, her ability to be broken and whole simultaneously. And in that clarity, in that honest sight, She'd found freedom. The glasses lay forgotten in a drawer somewhere, a prop from a performance that no longer served her. She didn't need them anymore. Didn't need the shield, the excuse, the carefully constructed vulnerability. She was Bryn Callahan, fighter and healer, student and teacher, survivor and thriver, powerful and merciful, holy and unapologetically herself. And that was enough. That was everything. That was the victory that mattered.